Welcome everybody to our act. Please take your seats so we can get this started. We are already running behind time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this day of our convention, today Saturday, September 15th. This morning's session is going to begin with a panel discussion looking at the questions of sustainability of the media in this current era of social media and new technologies. We have on our panel a list of speakers who are going to delve into this question. The recent report by the Reuters Institute highlighted how the rising trend of new media technologies, mobile phone and social media have disrupted the practice of journalism in its traditional forms in Africa. According to this report, the increasing penetration of these technologies has fragmented the audiences of traditional media, undermined advertising revenues, and weakened the role of journalistic gatekeepers. Liberia has also witnessed this warm embrace of social media technology. Between 2019 and 2020, mobile phone connections in Liberia increased by about 2,799, an increase that has been due primarily to the liberalization of the technology market in the country. This rise in the use of social media and mobile media has affected the way information is acquired and distributed in Liberia. Social media is now the second major source of information for Liberians, according to a recent Associa study. This significant use of social media as a major news channel affects the role of journalists as gatekeepers and the deliveries of credible, independent public information. Governments have joined, not only in Liberia, but across the world, have joined a growing number of people using social media as a source of information and a medium for dissemination of information. This use of new technology by government seems to be aimed not only at dissemination, but controlling, manipulating, and distorting contents being supplied on social media about government operations and the performances of government programs. This involves the deployment of propaganda producers on various social media sites to ensure that these distorted contents are highly visible and fully integrated. It has undermined the public trust in traditional journalism and threatened the sustenance of a free and independent press and participatory governance in the country. The media in Liberia has shown signs of vibrancy as measured by the number of newspapers in the country and radio stations blaring the airwaves. However, financial sustainability remains a challenge for the Liberian media. This has been due to the lack of efficient business structures, according to the recent media sustainability study, within media institutions and the perceived bias associated with the award of government advertising to the media institutions. Government advertisement, I need not tell you, represents a major share of revenue for media in Liberia. Therefore, not only does the selected applications of advertisement by government to media institutions limit the ability of media houses to pay their reporters better wages, it also limits the ability of media houses to operate independently, pay their reporters respectable wages, and ensure the practice of ethical journalism. Many reporters have had to either compromise their reportage or rely on gratuity in exchange for cash award to supplement their meager income. These practices are in breach of the ethics of journalism. It is against this background that today we are convening this panel discussion to look at the question of building on the progress we've made so far? And how can we advance a more ethical, independent, and sustainable media in Liberia in the wake of the current landscape? In this direction, we've invited a list of panelists to address this question from various dimensions. We have Mr. Peter Quaqua, former Press Union of Liberia president and current president of the West African Journalists Association. We have Mr. Charles Coffey, president of the Press Union of Liberia at the moment. Ms. Korto Reeves, Yale University Maurice and Greenberry Ward Fellow, who has been a keen media observer. Mr. Joseph Bartuah, former managing editor of the newspaper, and Mr. Othello Garblah, managing editor of the New Dawn newspaper in Monrovia. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, I will urge you all to applaud the panelists as we invite them to take their seats and begin this discussion. Our first speaker to look at this question this morning is Mr. Peter Quaqua, who is going to be speaking to us from Monrovia, Liberia. Mr. Quaqua, if you are there, you can now take the floor with your presentation. Quaqua, as you do that, could you kindly unmute yourself? Peter, can you please unmute? We are not hearing you. All right, while we try to sort out that technology problem with Peter, we will now ask Ms. Korto Reeves if she would do us a favor by going ahead with her presentation.
Yeah, definitely. I can go ahead while we wait for Peter. All protocols observed. That is a Liberian thing. We have to acknowledge the presence of everyone who is a part of this discussion this morning. I want to thank the Association of Liberian Journalists in America for this invite. I would like to offer my thoughts on the theme towards a more ethical, independent, sustainable media in Liberia. We must continue to utilize this public platform that goes beyond boundaries, politics, and individuals to speak of a Liberia that works for its people. More than 27 years ago, I walked into the New Democrat offices on Center Street looking for a job. There was no advertisement, and I had no idea who owned or worked at the papers. I did a test and got hired, actually immediately. And it's intentional that I'm asking for a reflection here, going back almost 30 years. What did the media look like? During these times, more than 2 decades ago, we faced a different level of polarization. We edited the papers up to midnight and took the day's labor to Savannah. I'm sure many of you remember Savannah Printing Press. We had 0 or limited options, especially when we heard that the president owned the printing press. It was a time when journalists feared warlords, and some journalists had visible visible relationships with warlords. While it was a media claiming to recover from pre-war context, the polarization has started. I tell this story to identify some of the causes of the current context that we face today. All of this happened while we look forward to entering a world whose standards of human rights extended to and accommodated Liberian journalists and human rights activists. It was a time when the value and need for justice presented a belief that it was predictable and inevitable. Journalists and civil society leaders believed the war's atrocities and pre-war inequalities would be addressed. The basis of the faith rested in our memory of the unimaginable pain, loss, and violence we had experienced as a people. Let me be clear here. While this was not a collective, collaborative agenda, Liberians were looking forward with the media accountability to end the hegemonic control of the Liberian people and their resources could not be underestimated at this time. In the end, and I'm talking about today, we made progress, but the divide and polarization rose exponentially with diverse influences, including the state, political parties, and the private sector. Ethics and standards were replaced by an emerging form of post-war polarization. While the Table Mountain Declaration was signed, the Gender Equity in Politics Bill evolved to a neutralized, watered-down version. We recently enacted the Domestic Violence Bill, but continue to experience multiple and intersecting crises reinforced by the pandemic, debt crisis, violence against women and girls, and state retreat. Again, the Liberian media finds itself in a time when there are economic returns for a lack of ethics in the sector. Polarization pays. Media ethics and integrity is affected by social media, and the speed of turnover supports the consistent demand for news. There is a competing system of generation, from Facebook to Twitter, from websites to local dailies. With a staggering shift from the basic layout rooms, editors and publishers are doing what is demanded during these times: retweet, recarry the story, and in some unfortunate cases, support the buildup of parties to a manufactured consent environment, fueled by the highest bidder. There is a positive position to all of this. There are opportunities in people and communities reimagining the future. First, we must rely on the fact that media ethics models exist across the continent and in civil society spaces. To protect a free, responsible, and independent media and an active, engaging, and informed civil society, we must forge relationships of solidarity and shared learning to face the next significant milestone of Liberia and the media. Simultaneously, we must clean house and acknowledge the rights of all. We must increase skills, produce knowledge, and contextualize standards to address the quality deficit and limited creative thinking that we have currently. We must be able to ground our organizations, our institutions, in the reality that the media must pick itself up from the doldrums of manipulation and irrelevance. We must challenge false narratives and solutions for our country so that we have space for the truth to land. I would like to end by making a few recommendations. We have to reimagine ethics through an intersectional feminist lens. What do I mean by that? I'll give you a practical example. A few years back, maybe a decade or less, we did a report, Action Aid, working with the Liberian Media Center. And that report was called Mapping the Absent Voices. I believe that internally and externally. This is an opportunity. If you can get a copy of that report, it still presents a platform. It still presents an opportunity to be able to work with the media, work with ourselves and say, what is it that we need to fix in terms of our systems and structures? I also believe that we should organize, fundraise in non-traditional places. So I'm not talking about, you know, someone who has power who's going to give the media money and say, work for me, you know, for the next 5 years until elections. That's not what I'm saying. We should fundraise and connect in ways that elevate our roles from editors and journalists, push into the spaces of cartoon receivers. We need to shift from that. You know, it doesn't go with the current context and the current problems that Liberia face. We need to look at the new frontiers. Journalists in Liberia, media institutions, we must research. We must do further learning on the external context. We must encourage specialization and strengthen accountability on many different issues. I will name a few: climate justice, debt, and generally unpacking the 1926 development model that we have in our country that sort of pushes us to all of these issues of breaking the standards, removing the ethics from our work, and doing all of that with impunity. We must also continue to train on ethics and reporting. There are many new generations, you know, there's a new generation of journalists. There are people who have been working as journalists for close to 30 years, and they believe that there's nothing new for me to learn. You know, it's business as usual. I think we need to do a lot of training around this and create a learning environment for this critical transition in Liberia. And what do I mean by transition? I mean that Liberia is affected by the external environment, external trends and environment. So whatever is happening out there that relates to, you know, the environment, climate justice again, labor, violence, you know, young people are rethinking their values around elections. All of these things, we need to take, you know, control of it as the media. And, you know, last, we need to connect to regional and global alliances where research and studies have been done. You know, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's important to contextualize on the work that has been done around media ethics and sustainable models for democracy on the continent, so that we can, you know, make that work for Liberia, for our country, and the work that we do. So the media is one of the Liberian media is one of the few bastions of hope to demand accountability for this social contract that we have for the government. And I believe that journalists, you know, publishers, and everyone who form this community, we must build new systems and structures for adaptation to the changing global landscape. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams, for that wonderful presentation. I think this would be a good segue now to bring in Mr. Peter Quaqua, looking at the last point that you made, talking about regional and global alliances to learn about current thinking of ethics and models of sustainability. Mr. Quaqua has worked not only locally as a media leader, but he's known across the globe as a fighter for free speech and independence rights. So Peter, if you are connected, can you please begin your presentation now?
Yes, Sam, thank you very kindly. I should apologize. I didn't really know that I was being brought forward. At the same time, my internet signal dropped. So that is probably some of the challenges journalists are faced with here. You don't have proper connectivity to even talk about digital advertisement. So let me start by expressing thanks to the leadership of WAJA for granting me this opportunity to say a few words to delegates and guests attending your 7th annual convention at Sambo in New Jersey. the USA and by technology. I'm extremely grateful and humble as always to be serving on this panel with these very eminent personalities. I'm happy to see my sister Korto on this panel, one of the very critical voices we've had in our country over time. You have asked us to speak on the subject of your team for this celebration towards a more critical, independent, and sustainable media in Liberia. Your team is loaded with complex but relevant issues that could be treated in separate presentations. These issues form the basis for some of the recurring debates in media development, not just in Liberia, but elsewhere in the sub-region. I'm aware that some media owners and journalists are more receptive and comfortable discussing media sustainability as it discusses the need for capital to keep their companies afloat, whereas ethical and independent journalism are gray areas and therefore controversial for some. So it seems like a smart idea to squeeze these topics in one presentation anyway, if time allows. For me, it is a non-starter to be crusading for media viability and at the same time shying away. Sorry, I got distracted by somebody. Hello? Hello, am I on?
Mr. President, go right ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. So as I was saying, your team is loaded with complex but very relevant issues that could be treated in separate presentations. These issues form the basis for some of the recurring debates in media development, not just in Liberia, but elsewhere in the sub-region. I'm always clear in my thoughts that journalists and media owners most of the time are receptive and comfortable discussing media sustainability because it discusses the need for capital to keep their institutions afloat. Whereas independent and ethical journalism are gray areas and therefore controversial at some point. So it seems like a new thinking, but also a very old one, that we are talking about media ethics and sustainability. To be crucialing for media viability and not talking about ethics and independence, I'm not sure we can succeed because they are not mutually exclusive. If media is truly a development tool and a requirement for democratic governance, then it must be treated as a sector to be developed and not merely patronized. As we therefore talk about these intricate issues at this convention, I must suggest to you that it takes a combined effort of many actors, including media practitioners, government, private sector, civil society, development partners, and the larger consuming public to mitigate the impact of the problem confronting the media sector in our country. The celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Windhoek Declaration on Press Freedom was held on the theme, Information as Public Good. Delegates adopted a new declaration known as the Windhoek Plus 30. The discussions were centered on media viability, transparency of digital platforms, and the empowerment of citizens with media and information literacy. This is a global call to action that Liberia must run with. There is little or no disagreement that media sustainability is crucial to independence. But independence from what and whom? I am sure the first answer that comes to mind is independence from the government. Yes, the government is the usual suspect, because it is the government that must enable the environment for media to operate freely, and that includes the safety of journalists. But we must also seek freedom and independence from politicians and powerful businesses. Like government, they too seek to control and influence the media. It is therefore safe to infer that the media has been fighting its own kind of Cold War, a war executed by government, opposition political parties, powerful businesses, and at that art, the media itself. Having said that, dear colleagues, permit me to submit to you that the ownership structures of the growing number of
Yes, we are having some trouble with connections to Monrovia, and this should not surprise us given the context in which we operate. So we're going to beg your indulgence that we just be patient for the next few seconds and see whether Peter is going to be able to reconnect. Peter, are you there?
Am I there?
Yes, go ahead. We lost you briefly.
Am I there? Sorry about this. I'm trying to catch it. Sorry. So am I on now?
Go right ahead.
So I like to premise my discussions actually on ownership, of the media, because that seemed to be a very critical part of our situation currently in the country. So I was making the point that media ownership, the ownership structures of the growing number of media outlets in Liberia presents a new kind of threat to independent journalism. One of the cardinal responsibilities of the media in a conflict transitioning country like Liberia is to strengthen democracy and consolidate the peace. This cannot be achieved, however, if ethical imperatives are sacrificed at the altar of self-seeking media owners pursuing political interests. It is almost impossible to practice journalism without minimally paying attention to the truth, conflict of interest, sensationalism, and quality content if you desire to be viable. These are the core values that should never be compromised in any circumstances. While celebrating owners that have remained true and committed to their investment in the media and journalism, allow me to quote and paraphrase some indicators for media availability. And I must, on this panel, commend most of the organizations that are doing well. I'm talking about media organizations, including the head of the Publisher Association, who is on this panel. I should recognize that. It says, in addition to trust and credibility, media owners must be transparent and promote diversity of views. They must respect editorial independence of their staff and refrain from interfering in content due to personal or corporate interests. They must have sound business and financial plans. These are some of the difficulties that our media landscape is suffering. In addition to the political arguments that we have already heard, I must say to you that to understand the dynamics of this discussion, we must talk about how the politics of the country is situated with the media. The fact is that the Liberian politics has become an enterprise of self-glorification that is also true of our neighbors in the sub-region. And the media are targeted as tools for the acquisition of political power. By law, anybody can own media in Liberia. The attraction to politics has a connection to the proliferation of media entities in the country. Politicians are more inclined to influencing media ownership. They are either setting up media or are patronizing the ones that exist. Almost 20 years of uninterrupted stability in Liberia after a civil conflict, there is an explosion of media institutions, notwithstanding the stress on the economy. Figures show more than 40 irregular, regular, and daily newspapers on the stand. There are 100 radio stations captured in a radio mapping project conducted by Internews, a USAID-funded project. The good and bad news is that we have reached a cutoff point, I think, because the Liberia Telecommunication Authority may almost have sent out all the frequencies that it had to issue. So if you check the radio dial in Liberia, you find out that radio stations are jamming each other. The Telecoms Act of 2007 gives the LTA the power to issue license. However, such regulations only cover technical aspects linked to spectrum. The critical areas such as media concentration, content, advertising, protection of minors, etc., are not contemplated by any legal instrument. You should listen to some radio stations in our country. Protest and insults are commonplace, occasioned by angry and sometimes arrogant radio hosts. How is this possible? If we had a regulator that would check not just the issue of issuing frequencies, but we look at content. It is understood that social media, the social media revolution, is having an effect on legacy media, for better or for worse. But I can imagine that journalists who are media literate will indulge themselves into acts such as insults and the extent of rudeness that we have heard on radio stations in their work. Whether we are online or offline, I like to believe that journalists should remain journalists in whatever they do. The broadcast content are regulated by the Ministry of Information and the Liberia Telecommunication Authority. The ministry, of course, has been operating on the Decree 46 of the PRC decree, which gives it discretionary powers. This means the regulatory framework of the electronic media is scattered between the LTA and the Ministry of Information. The ministry must give the LTA the go-ahead before a frequency is allocated, which has proven to be problematic. Hence, the need for the establishment of an independent broadcast regulator with the appropriate competencies to consolidate and manage these powers. Also, the spectrum and license provider lacks the monitoring capacity to keep these stations within the specific domain for broadcast requirement. For instance, there is a sense that community radio stations want to operate as commercial radio, but maintain the status of a community radio. Transmitting capacities go far beyond the communities they are intended for. In the absence of the broadcast regulator, we have seen the press union trying to intervene in ensuring that journalists are made to account for some of the problems that are created. Now, let me end on this note, since there are other stakes standing by. It is fair to say that the economy of the media is a major part of the equation. The advertising market is too small to support sustainability of the many media outlets in our country. The days of Ome was harvest time, as one media manager put it. This points to the mission's huge advertising envelope. In fact, Ome should be credited with the growth of the newspaper sector in our country. Fast forward, Ome officially left Liberia only a few years ago in 2018, but the harvest has already dried up, and some institutions are scarcely surviving because they did not plan. In the absence of the peacekeepers' money, the government has been the main advertiser. Many of you are too aware that our government, past and present, has always been deceptive and manipulative in dealing with the media. At worst, the government easily weaponizes advertisement against media houses considered critical of their policies. There has been instances in between times that the government made deliberate efforts to inhibit critical media from accessing legitimate ads. The Ministry of Information became the clearinghouse for public sector advertising dollars, while at the same time, the government opening up the executive mansion website to private sector ad, thereby further narrowing the advertising market. Let me conclude by saying, in spite of the trade union status of the press union to bargain with employers for the welfare of journalists, journalist remuneration in Liberia remains an intractable issue. We drafted and approved a collective bargaining agreement in 2012 with the view of bettering the conditions of service for journalists. But media owners and managers have shown little interest in discussing the terms. Like the issues of ethics and independence, paying journalists with livable wage appears to be an elephant in the room. Journalists must therefore work at the mercy of some media owners. It should be easy to point to poor remuneration as one of the reasons for the ethical infraction. But if we all hold this to be truthful, then the fight against corruption in government is almost meaningless, because this too is corruption. This too is corruption. No wonder why spaces and airtime are sold to politicians to buy off their rivals and promote disinformation. Undeniably, the few media houses that are making the difference in dignifying their workers are comparatively providing a better content than those ignoring ethical safeguards. The best media managers and owners will spend time not only on profit, but on high quality content and dignifying their reporters and journalists who are their asset. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Peter. We all are aware how constrained we are about time, and you guys are doing an excellent presentation. So, but I would appeal that we stick to the original plan of using just 7 minutes for your opening remarks, so we can have a lot of time for interactions between you and your colleagues here at this convention. So on that note, I will now turn over to the next speaker, Mr. Joseph Bartuah. I would think because of Mr. Bartuah's position, we will have to hold him to be the last since he's here with us in the hall, and few those of you speakers who are coming into us virtually. So I will now turn over to Mr. Charles Coffey to go ahead with his presentation. Mr. Coffey, are you there? President of Liberia, President. All right,
We're still trying.
all right, while Mr. Coffey tries to sort out the connection issue with our people in the background, we will now ask Mr. Othello Garblah, if you will, to please step in and go ahead with your presentation.
Action on mute.
Can you please unmute yourself, Mr. Garblah? You are still muted. The unmute will be right towards the left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Have you gotten? I'm on mute, right? Am I okay now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. President and officials of all Liberian journalists in America, WAJA, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to be sharing this platform with you today as we brainstorm on how we can move towards a more ethical, independent, and sustainable media in Liberia. Currently, there are over 50 newspapers in Liberia, 10 of which are daily, whilst the rest are tri-weekly, bi-weekly, and weekly. Added to this number are a plethora of online magazines and TVs, with about 24 of radio stations in Monrovia alone.
The video
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
With about 24 of radio stations in Monrovia alone, and at least 6 television stations, including state broadcaster LNTV. Most of the newly established media institutions are owned and operated by politicians whose aims and objectives are to promote their political agendas. With the multiplicity of media entities mentioned here above, comes the question of ethics, independence, and sustainability. There is absolutely no doubt that the media landscape in Liberia, like any other country in the world, is not void of ethical issues. But the advent of politically established institutions have even worsened the situation. As it is often said, he that pays the piper calls the tune. However, that doesn't mean individual journalists, no matter which institution you work for, whether political or apolitical, has the duty to uphold ethical standards as required by the core values of journalism profession: truth, accuracy, and balanced reporting. Another question often raised, and which is again tied to the ownership of media institutions in Liberia, is independence. The question of how independent media institutions can only be tied The question of how independence a media institution is can only be tied to its ownership, and therefore the question of agenda setting is key. It is the political owner that sets the agenda for the institution, or journalists and media managers that manage these institutions. Even some of the privately owned institutions are at risk of compromising their independence at times due to the economic hardship that has engulfed the media industry here. And that brings us to the issue of sustainability. All over the world, Liberia no exception, media entities survive on advertisement sales, as in the case of newspaper alone. As in the case of newspaper alone cannot sustain the media. The media depends on advertising revenue to sustain itself, pay staff, rents, taxes, and cover its overheads. However, for nearly 5 years now and counting, most of the advertisement revenues have been directed at the Executive Mansion's website, the President of the Republic of Liberia website. This practice, which was introduced at the latter stage of former President Eddie Johnson Sirleaf's regime, was inherited in and is being maximized by the regime of President George M. Weah. Although he had pledged during his inaugural speech that Liberian businesses will not be spectators in their own country, the media industry, which is yet to see this unfolding, continues to struggle to make ends meet. A few weeks ago, the Publishers Association of Liberia met with Deputy Minister Jalawa Tompo during his courtesy call on PAR leadership, and we informed him that the publication of all advertisements on the president's website is making the media poorer, because all the much needed advertising revenues are being directed at the website. NGOs, including the government of Liberia, job vacancies and all are being directed there. We made a proposition that at least a publication of said advertisement in 2 to 3 newspapers should be the prerequisite of adverts being placed on the website, and the said advertiser should present these people as proof. Conclusion. Considering UNESCO's 2021 World Press Freedom Day theme, information as a public good, there have been many researchers coming up with fresh approaches assessing whether public subsidy might provide part of a solution to supporting independent media, especially in low and middle income countries like ours. These papers are being designed to prompt further research and debate on the topic of supporting independent public interest media. The UK government, for example, is supporting a 3-year program led by a consortium of international and national media organizations, including the BBC Media Action to develop effective approaches to strengthening public interest media content in low-income countries. The project considers independent media as being vital for people to access trustworthy information. It argues that the urge has become increasingly important in an age of misinformation, but it also examines the media capacity to supply such information as disappearing around the world, particularly in low-income countries like ours. Hence, the need for some form of intervention. We at PAS strongly share this view and believe that it is possible to obtain and maintain ethical standards among media practitioners in Liberia. And also the media can function as independent institution and become a sustainable business should there be such interventions made. First, there is a need to put in place a business model for media institutions here. A good marketing structure. By that I mean setting up the advertising and business department of the entity, putting in place a financial disbursement mechanism, a procedure for cash and check disbursement. A quick fix to this, which PAR has been working on as it tries to attract donors grant, is to set certain ethical conditions that will qualify media institutions to apply for those grants, and that the grants should be given in phases, meaning to qualify for the next stage of a media institution should show proof that it has met all the parameters required. For example, your story should meet certain threshold, multiple sourcing, be truthful, accurate, and balanced. Money should be used for production and gathering of stories only. There should be track records to show that sales and advertisement monies are deposited and a financial procedure for disbursement followed, which with such business practices put in place, the media can become a sustainable business. Finally, the government, if necessary, could see information as a public good, an essential tool for promoting sustainable democracy, and might consider providing some form of subsidy for the media through tax breaks and reduction in the prices of production materials such as newsprints and other technical devices used in the gallery and dissemination and production of news materials for public consumption. Although there has to be mechanism put in place before that. The media in Liberia right now requires all hands on deck to salvage it from dying. And I believe that when we all come together and strategize and put in place these mechanisms, the media will survive. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mr. Garblah. Mr. Charles Coffey, can we get you on now? If you are there, can you kindly unmute yourself? Mr. Coffey. All right, while we are with Mr. Coffey, I think it will be expedient now, for the sake of time, to turn over to this table and invite Mr. Joseph Bartuah, former managing editor of the independent news newspaper of Monrovia, to deliver his presentation. In keeping with our earlier agreements, we urge you to please stick to the 7 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. I know it's lobbying time here in the US, so I may be lobbying for at least 3 minutes in addition. So to go the main issue, and due to the acute allotment of time, I will begin with the bare minimum. That is, what should come at the end will be at the beginning. So that in case that Johnson said, time off, then I start. As I see it, there are 3 steps towards sustaining the independence and integrity of traditional media in Liberia and probably around the world. That is A, the quality of our work. Because our professionalism will be the pivotal foundation for sustaining traditional democracy, traditional journalism. B, mainstreaming media consolidation and cooperative. One of the speakers have already said that there is a proliferation of newspapers in Liberia. And C, establishing a permanent free media endowment fund. In his resourceful paper, Dr. Samuel Johnson cites a recent report by the Writers Institute about how 21st century media technologies are gradually tilting the contemporary media landscape. That is the polarization of traditional media audiences, and also how the proliferation of unorthodox media is eroding the basic revenue generating capacities of traditional media outlets. In other words, more and more people continue to access media technologies, many of them typically resort to practicing what I call citizens journalism or amateur broadcasting. For many people, mobile technologies tend to appeal to their sense of creativity, hence the proliferation of or multiplicity of social media outlets on multiple social media platforms. However, it would be naive or somehow disingenuous for one to assume that it's only creativity or natural love for the media profession that is accelerating the swarming of the various social media platforms. In the specific case of Liberia, Dr. Johnson adds, quote, between 2019 and 2020, mobile phone connections in Liberia increased by about 2,799, that is 0.5%, an increase that has been due primarily to the liberalization of the technology market in the country, unquote. As I perused Dr. Johnson's paper, I was reminded of the rudimentary characterization of news in freshman journalism class as a sort of man-by-door scenario. Obviously, when it happens the other way around, that is when a dog bites a man, that's a mere piece of information, not news. Now, with the proliferation of social media platforms, it seems that the proverbial man is not only biting a dog. We are also beginning to witness the dog biter attempting to banish the injuries he has inflicted on the dog. I think that Dr. Johnson best captures this bizarre scenario when he writes, quote, governments have joined the growing number of people using social media as a source of information, unquote. And he adds that, quote, controlling, manipulating, and distorting contents, unquote, of news articles appear to be the ultimate goal of such governments. Here in the US, a certain political operator with no known credibility once tagged this phenomenon as an alternative fact. The truth is that people in privileged positions, governments are bent on honing a manipulating some segments of the populace and thereby confusing them or further compounding their gullibility. If one can put it in Liberian parlance, is it not fishy? Is it not suspicious or mischievous, if not mischievous, that governments, which are traditionally the biggest newsmakers, have now enthusiastically joined the social media proliferation bandwagon, profusely blowing their own trumpet? Again, to put it in the typical Liberian way, have you ever heard a Fanti woman say, "I'm going to distract you"? One of the dismal results is that the distinctive line between alternative facts or fake news and traditional news are increasingly becoming blurred. In other words, professional whitewashers are now swarming the social media platforms to inundate our people with alternative facts or fake news. Against this background, the onus is on all well-meaning journalists to do our due diligence, to redouble our efforts in fiercely defending the decency of democracy. We must exert every effort to thoroughly investigate and meticulously analyze issues so that our people won't be hoodwinked by artificially orchestrated euphoria. For example, in contemporary Liberian political lexicon, what does the word pro-poor actually mean? Does that mean pursuing policies to lift the people out of poverty, or perpetuating practices that continue to further pauperize the very people? Does that mean prudent policies that minimize corruption or callously swimming in the pool of corruption to further exacerbate the people's deprivation? As we gather here today, the key question is, I've made multiple assaults against professional journalism on multiple fronts. How can we sustain the continuity and integrity of the noble Inca fraternity? In other words, how can we set ourselves apart or distinguish ourselves? As I see it, we can set ourselves apart by going beyond the shadow of superficiality, by persistent and consistent probing, inquiry, by seeking answers to pertinent questions, because the people want to know. When lying becomes a commercially viable profit-making industry, we must stick with the truth. We must strive to remove all modalities of equivocation or ambiguity on rhetorical soundbites and public policies. When government employees' corpses are found in a vehicle on the streets of Monrovia, journalists must act, because the people want to know the actual perpetrators of such dastardly, horrific acts. When the Liberian government issues a press release claiming that an elite presidential security officer traveling with the president had committed suicide by shooting himself in the head 3 times, the press must act, because such possibility is almost non-existent. When David Miller, a young and seemingly healthy journalist, is cruelly brutalized by security officers, leading to his death 3 weeks later, Liberian journalists must act, because it's a dreadful human rights violation. We will set ourselves apart. We will stand out among the whitewashing professionals, the lying for profit operatives, based on the sheer quality of our government. Now, folks, let us all remember this. There are millions of people around the world who know how to cook, but not everyone who cooks is a chef. Likewise, if I can ask, how many persons in this room how many persons have a driving lesson, valid driving lesson? If you have a driving lesson, will you please raise your hand? Okay. So I think we have a lot of people with driving lesson here. Or how many chauffeurs in this room right now? How many chauffeurs? How many professional chauffeurs here? So it goes without saying that just as not everyone that cooks is a chef, just as not everyone with a driving lesson who drives is a chauffeur. so too, not everyone who is capable of writing a piece of information is a journalist. Thank you.
We are really pressed for time. I hope we can bring in Mr. Coffey now. Mr. Coffey, are you there?
Yes.
Can you please increase your volume?
Yes, I'm getting you. Clear.
Go right ahead with your
Go
presentation.
right ahead, Mr. Coffey.
All right. Thank you very much. First, let me be on the existing protocol and my regards to the leadership and the other officers of WAJA, the members of WAJA from all over the world in the United States. We are very happy that this convention is taking place. It's unfortunate that we are not there in person as a result of the COVID. We exerted our efforts to be there, but other of us are aware. So, but I mean, it's important that we are participating. And WAJA initiative, especially support to the Press Union, is relevant in such a way that has helped us during the onset of the COVID-19. Resources were provided. In fact, we gave through WAJA provided rest to reporters and nose mark and so forth. So we must register that. So the operating environment of our country with reference to sustainability and ethical standards, the union continuing to enforce its code of ethics that requires that all journalists and media workers within the territorial confines of our country conform to ethical principles. So that is on course, though there are sometimes ethical transgression, and our National Media Council probe into that. We've been working with the Publisher Association, the Broadcaster Association, to make sure that people conform to ethical standards. So the issue with sustainability is of concern. Due to the appalling economic condition of our country, the Liberian media, many of the, especially grassroots newspapers, are going into self-censorship due to the lack of resources. So to sustain the media requires intervention financially. As Othello earlier indicated, it's important that donors who are helping us to develop the media provide some fundings, whether rotational or revolving loans, so as to sustain media entities. Because of the no money syndrome, most of the reporters lack the requisite resources to address the needs. So we developed a collective bargaining agreement that will compel media owners to make sure that remunerations and other benefits that electricity, the electricity situation across the country. So many of them will operate, but sometimes it affects so to sustain media entities in rural Liberia, especially community radio stations, is of concern. So generally, because of time factor, our country, there has been significant improvement in the freedom of expression and freedom of the press, though there are challenges with security and the media relations that we're trying to address. But the environment has improved. There's no journalist in prison for doing their journalistic work for now, to my knowledge. So they are free, they are working their proliferations of media institutions. What is needed now is to look at our economic status of the media, design strategies so that we can improve on that.
His presentation.
Mr. Coffey, are you there?
Yes. As I said, because of time factor, I just summarized that as I said that, yeah.
Thank you very much. You all thank the presenters to be open. You have 2 minutes. You have about 19 minutes. We're all being pressed for time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to summarize the presentations as I have planned. Instead, just ask some questions and open the floor for discussions. I would like to begin on the brilliant presentation by Ms. Reeves. And she has introduced something that is very crucial now in our own development agenda, the importance of the feminist lens. She talks about reimagining ethics through the feminist lens. And I wonder, how do we go about doing so? And I think no one is better positioned to discuss it within the Liberian context than Korto. Coffey, can you please unmute yourself, please?
Okay, yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, so I myself I recognize the time constraint. And one of the things that I mentioned when I talk about the feminist lens is because I realized that I needed to be, I needed to put this into categories, to be categorical about what I meant. And the basis and reference for what I'm saying is in a report that was done, Action Aid Liberia, with the leadership of the Liberia Media Center. We did a report that is called Mapping the Absent Voices. And I am going to share that report with my presentation so that you have more time to look at it. There are suggestions and recommendations. And the crux of the matter is, if we are talking about fixing the system that respects standards and ethics, there's no way that we can remove the issue of discrepancies within our own system. So that would, lean on some of the different issues related to economics, for example, pay, related to sort of status in the media, like who are the publishers, who are the editors, what are the jobs that are assigned to people based on gender. It's also about the manipulation of women within the media that sometimes, most times borders on sexual harassment. And that is what I call cleaning house. If we want to clean house, like Peter mentioned, this is not just about the viability of the media in economic terms. It's also about us being able to put our best foot forward. And when we say us, we mean everyone in the media. So women, men in the media, we have to put our best foot forward. So we must build systems of equality. We must have structures that are representative. And the change that we're looking for must be wholesome. It cannot be, piecemeal. So I am going to share the report. It's really detailed. It was very controversial, but I think we have come back to a point where it is relevant. Thank you.
One thing that came out of this presentation, what seems to be a theme that runs across all of the presentations in my mind, is the question of ownership. Peter highlighted it, Othello highlighted it. But as we talk about ownership, Peter highlighted the issue of corruption within the media. And there are calls for us to change the ownership structure. One way has been to open up the market to shareholders. But in the wake of corruption in the media, in the wake of media being a big business for politicians and self-seeking journalists, as Peter put it, I wonder how prepared is the media itself to open up itself to ownership and attract private businesses. And it's not a question only for Korto. I think it will be important that we hear from Peter, who raised this point, Othello Garblah, who is the Publisher Association's president, and maybe Mr. Coffey. How do we address this corruption issue in the media and open it up to strengthen its viability and sustainability? Anyone can go first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My approach to this question is in twofold. the media in Liberia, the media industry in Liberia is not seen as a viable business to any investor. In the first place, banks will not easily give a media entity a loan unless that media operator is a politician, because most politicians are the only people who are interested in establishing media institutions. For the low-key men like us who want to venture into that place, the banks are not willing to give you a loan. Actually, because they believe that your industry is not performing. Equally so, there have been steps taken by many of us, including me, to open up the door to shareholding, but not many people are actually interested because they know that the media industry does not make money. It does not make money. So therefore, investing in a venture that does not make money is not interested to them unless there's other things added to it. So it is not that the media does not want to open its door to shareholders, but it is the shareholders' interest. Because, for instance, and I will say emphatically, there is no shareholder that will come into the New Dawn and decides that I do not publish certain stories on certain political figures. That's not going to happen. And therefore, our New Dawn may not be a likely entity for any politician with money to come and invest. So it is something that leads me to another issue of one question that has been raised over and over is, why don't you guys form a conglomerate? Again, what undermines these ideas often at times is interest. My decision not to be loyal to a particular political candidate or to political candidate must intervene or come in contrast with a would-be partner who has some political collaboration that he wants or interest that he wants to protect. So these are the issues that we should look at. First, there is no investor that is interested in owning a media industry. I have been in this country since 2005. I have not experienced that. Two, the banks see this industry as an underperformer. So it's difficult to attract shareholdings. Thank you very much.
This is an interesting point. If the banks are not willing to see media institutions as entity worthy of financial investment, I worry then what becomes the value of the business plan that you want to write to sell out the business entities. So, Peter, you on that?
Is that a follow-up? Hello?
Go ahead, Othello.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Garblah.
Basically, if the question was directed to me as a follow-up, I will hope that you could repeat it because of the network. There was a crack in your voice.
So here's my question.
Okay.
You just had a major challenge, and I think it has been a perennial challenge where banks, financial institutions, do not see the media entity as credit-worthy borrowers, so to speak. And so they are not people in which you want to risk your capital. Excellent point. But then I'm worried, what becomes the role now, or what becomes the value of the business plan? Because the function of the business plan is to be able to draw ideas that you can use to drum up capital, especially from the financial system. What becomes the value of the business plan in this whole project of sustainability if financial institutions do not see you worthy of credit?
Okay, so I gave you an example of what happened in the New Dawn. That is practical. I'm using the New Dawn as an example because that is something I've experienced myself. In 2009, when I left the New Democrat, on my way thinking that I should have gone back to Ghana to rejoin the Ghanaian Chronicle, I was fortunate to have gotten some ideas through friends, some work I did, and said, no, you can stay, you become a household need. So we decided to go with the IB Bank. And then IB Bank decided that I invited, what we did when we launched our paper was to invite financial institutions, companies, politicians, and people from the diplomatic circles to see the people behind the paper and how the paper was being structured. When we got through, there was a friend of mine who suggested that we could own a printing press. I said, that's a good idea, but how could we? So because I have friends in the bank, we decided to talk to them. Now, this was the first time I got hit that our industry are underperforming. We couldn't get a loan. What we then did was to have our board chair, then Councillor Anybody Wonder, to send his property, and my property, my house was at the roof level, and we inflated the value of my house and the value of Councillor Wonder's house, and we put that together. Councillor Wonder being the board member and his house being as a collateral, we were fortunate to have gotten a 60,000 loan to get our machine, but that did not come easy. We had to also pledge a commitment to Councillor Anybody Wonder that should the bank foreclose on our homes, he would take over the New Dawn, run it as a business until the loan were paid off. Fortunately for us, after we took the loan, came the election, then we had a contract with the Lone Star Cell. But how many media institutions will have such a privilege to have obtained such a loan? So if you look at the whole, then we'll say that the banks have actually closed their eyes on the industry. So what I think many should do, for extent, the person who prepared our business plan at the time was the husband of one of the vice president of the bank, who was a Kenyan American lady, because she was my friend and I have worked with them before. So he became he ran the very first business page of the New Dawn. He developed the business plan of the paper and how our earnings were. And to tell you the truth, he has helped us put in place some financial models, some marketing models that have helped us to pay it. But when we speak for the general. So we look at what cut across the entire media landscape. I think it is important at this point to answer your question to say that there is a need that media institutions here should put together such a business plan that I think the bank will not be able to turn their eyes from. I hope you are getting me clear.
Sam?
Yes. Peter, before you come, I think we should take one question from the floor. Maybe that will help with your question. Okay, and I will ask those of us in the hall to be very brief because we are pressed for time. I have only 7 minutes left for this particular session. Yes, hold on. Just give us a second so they can let the guys who ask questions.
Go ahead.
Well, having listened to the speakers, it seems to suggest that we have a very huge problem. It is a profound problem. Finding a resolution to this problem, media viability, sustenance of the Nigerian media, we generate a lot. And over the years, a good number of us have advocated the need for media merger in Liberia. With all of these challenges, doesn't it make a lot of sense for media institutions in Liberia to begin to merge? Media institutions with similar media philosophies coming together to pull their resources together and hire individuals with the needed professional background to move the media landscape. Other than this, you're talking about ethics, everything will be a job. The media in Liberia is broke. That's my question. What do we do?
So Peter, you can take on this question along with the previous one.
Thank you, Sam. And I think that was Moses speaking, right? Actually, I must apologize from our end. Signals are very terrible here, and I'm barely hearing almost all the speakers that have spoken some of the points. But I picked the arguments from Othello, which for me is very key to the arguments I've raised in my presentation. The issue and the example of the New Dawn points to the issue of credibility and transparency of ownership. Most of our organizations in the media must see transparency of their ownership as a factor. And if you don't have credibility, you don't have the people. Now you call a very permanent name. Councillor Warner is a big name, and I'm not sure if he shows up in the bank, anybody will want to reject him. But can you say that about all the other media entities? There are a few that try to put themselves up, but very many of our colleagues who are running media entities are running it either as a family business or from their pockets. And when you conduct very serious business like this, it's not possible that people you will attract, investment. There are people around here who want to do business with the media, but they are seeing these media entities as personally driven organizations, individuals who are the manager, they are the accountant, they run everything. The show is run by one person, and it's not possible for any bank to do business with you. So the credibility of the institution matters. The transparency in the ownership of the institution also matters. And I like to, pick the issue of what raised by Moses. Long time ago, when I was in the press union, there was this argument about merger. There was one group that tried. I think two institutions came together, the Vanguard and the Few. Before we find out, that merger did not live to even see the ink dry on the agreement that they had. It began to break up. Again, it is trust. It is how we want to run the institutions that we establish as personal. It is all over the place. Radio stations are personally owned. And the last time one of my junior colleagues made a presentation and even mentioned a newspaper, a radio station that is owned by somebody who's trying to put his name on the radio station. There's this argument about Spoon owned by one Waterspoon. So come on, if you got money to run it, you can manage it. But when that institution begins to, to go down the drain, how do you attract other people to it? So these are the arguments. So media merger is a very good argument, but can we do that in this market that is driven individually? So that is our challenge.
You might unmute yourself. We're going to continue to read more questions from the floor. We'll start with Kari, and I will ask that we just fill the questions you guys make note and answer them in long. So I'll ask you to use 30 seconds for Kari.
Okay. Peter Quaqua have said it all, but what I really wanted to stress is when Korto was speaking, she did mention fundraise in non-traditional places. And research, connect to global alliances. That is something that I think the Liberian media can do. But like Peter mentioned, if you don't have credibility, manipulative attitude that the media is portraying at this point, it's going to be very difficult. So ethical wise, we need to step up. I can see that from my experiences with the federal government and the state government, I do know other international organizations like the World Bank. There are so many organizations out there that the press in Liberia can tap and get grants. Let's say grants, because there's no option for loan at this point. But I do know if we call ourselves, we're referring to ourselves as media personnel, we should be able to do research. You should be able to have people that can really articulate what your media institutions stand for, and you should be able to get grants. So we need to global alliance, as Korto said, and we need to make sure our institutions are very ethical, transparent, and up to the task. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I know all of us will participate, but all of us who will participate, all of us stick to 30 seconds. So I ask us to keep our question tight and straight to this point. No. I said just. Can you please ask your question, Mr. Eric Kennedy?
All right, thank you. So my question is Othello. Othello, the reporters in Monrovia continue to make a second attack on you, the publishers. That you guys are just not for yourself, you don't get paid, you run a business institution, collect the money, and the working condition is very dehumanizing. Are these criticisms fair? And if yes, what are you, the publishers, doing to improve the welfare of the people that are working for you? Thank you.
Okay, I think Korto has a point to make. Her hand is up. We can look at the screen, so we'll ask her now to comment.
Yeah, so I wanted to speak quickly, you know, from the perspective of the media becoming critical and becoming creative about how they do resource mobilization. And I think, Kadi, thank you for reinforcing, you know, what I had said earlier. I think this is a question about what comes first, the cart or the horse. And the reason I'm saying this is that, do we want to become credible, ethical, and seem good for business? You know, what we say, open for business before we can fundraise? Or do we want to be credible, ethical, and create a platform that is going to be attractive for funding? And the reason I make this point is that I've worked, you know, in Liberia. I'm a Liberian. I've worked in Liberia for close to, you know, 20 years. A lot of what I do has to do with resource mobilization. I've done that for almost 20 years. At the point where we are now, in terms of the global economic crisis, no, we don't have parts of money that are out there that the media is going to get. Even NGOs are suffering. So it is connected to the sort of problems we have even with the banking industry, that they may not have the resources to take risk. What do we need to do? We need to position ourselves in a way that we can do this. So positioning ourselves, let's think about it. What would happen even if we cannot merge the media around ownership? Can we merge the media and do a piece of research that is groundbreaking, that is looking at our development challenges? Say, for example, the foreign direct investment economic development strategy of the past government. Do we have like a line, do we have like a paper as the media that says we understand what that strategy was and how it is affecting the current development process in the country? How it's affecting Liberian people in terms of the poverty crisis in the country? It's not enough to be reactionary and say, you know, people are suffering. The people are not in school. You see all of these people in the papers on a daily basis, and that is right. We have to do the reportage. However, if we can go to the root of the problem, what is the economic situation? How is this connected to our relationship with the World Bank and the policy prescriptions of the World Bank? How does that affect public services? You know, if the media can do that, and it comes out and you have people who are specialized in reporting, it's not just, you know, the newspaper and what we put out on a daily basis, but programs that will counter, you know, the kind of gathering you have on Spoon. And I'm not saying that I don't like Spoon, but I'm just saying that we can increase the quality in a way that attracts funding. We can look for funding in different spaces that will support us to build the media, to build the institution. And I've seen that work. I'm a fundraiser. I've raised more than, you know, $20 million, and sometimes in NGOs, also sometimes in organizations that I run myself. I'm the co-founder of the Liberian Feminist Forum. So I'm saying that it is possible in these times, but you have to give something that is not the usual, something that is non-traditional. So can we think about doing that, about building alliances around research, about interrogating the development challenges, about getting journalists to specialize in particular areas? Like who are the journalists we have specialized around COVID and the access and availability to vaccines? Who are the journalists? It's not enough to say that one man took the AstraZeneca, then he took the Johnson & Johnson and he died, and next week you find out that he did not die. We should be giving more from from that perspective. So I just wanted to interject and say that there is a way to do this. There are no problems, that we cannot overcome. There's a way to do this, and we have to think about that way. So we can go to the banks, yes, but maybe we want to take something else to the bank that they will want to be a part of. So thank you.
Okay.
Something that I was already thinking about. We talked about the supply side in economics as well. Factors that affect the production of news. But we haven't looked at the question of factors that make news attractive to the readers, all the viewers, all the listeners. And what you just highlighted is the question of taste. What make your production attractive? Why would people want to listen to radio station A and not radio station B? So one of the issues that has been coming up, criticism for the few times I've been in Monrovia, has been, and someone highlighted it in the presentation that Mr. Bartuah and Peter even highlighted it. How do we address this quality? How do we go into reportage or publications that will be attractive to the consumers and not to serve the interest of ownership? And I'm borrowing here from Peter, in our own reportage. This is something I want us to think about as I feel another question from the floor.
Mine is not actually a question, but just what I wanted to express was contained in the last key point at Korto stress. In addition to that, I think the problem with the media in Liberia is the problem of management. For example, all of the trainings that people are when we the reporters, I haven't heard of a training that introduces management principles or management skills to media institutions. Because the media is a public information service as much as it is a business service. So if you don't have strong discipline in managing the little funds that media generate, you will go nowhere.
All right, Peter, I know you wanted to answer the questions that came from the floor. Charles, Othello, you guys can go ahead now.
There was a question put to me before Korto made her intervention, and I would like to address that. Is about the reporters complaining about media managers not paying them, doesn't care for their welfare, all of that. And I will say the truth to this. There are people on this panel who know the kind of person I am. I'm one person who is brutal to the truth. The issue at bit is that there has been a financial problem. Since the COVID, media institutions have been struggling. Yes, that does not give them the right not to take care of the reporters. Whatever dime that is earned, I strongly believe should be given to the reporter. What happens to other institutions, how they handle their financial management system is unknown to me as president of the Publisher Association. But this is what I've always been on. That publishers should be able to seek after the welfare of their reporters. The few publishers that are closer to me, and those are, in fact, I have gone to a stage where I have asked to ask how much do they pay their reporters. Even though those are things we are still working on and I cannot disclose it on this platform, I mean in this gallery. But there are things we are working towards to ensure that publishers are responsible toward their employees. Because I make them understand, with all your employees, you have no institution. And most of them are trying to agree with me. So yes, it is true there have been points where reporters have to grumble, say they don't care for them. We understand that. The thing we do is that if we know we're supposed to pay you at the end of the month and the money is not coming forth and we have difficulty, we call a meeting and tell you, hey guys, with the look of things, we will not be able to pay at such and so time. But let's see how we progress and maybe we can pay you at such a time. I think publishers should try to communicate. Publishers too are having difficulties. The issue of taxes. the issue of rents. So, but the communication line between they and their employees are lacking, and that I can say. So when we open this communication line, the reporters will understand the circumstances the publishers and the bosses are going through, and I think that will address the issue. The second thing about the issue raised is that the media industry in Liberia, from the time I've been here, they have all been about training. And Peter on this program will bear me with this. We spoke at another program another time that I'm saying that it's a time now to redesign the kind of training models that is being brought here. To also, not only that, but to look at the business aspect and to become practical. Because most times, even the reporters that have been trained, when they go back and their performances does not show anything that they have ever gotten any training. Make the training practical. If, for instance, you are training reporters how to write feature articles, at the end of that training, let them produce at least 1 or 2 feature articles to prove that what they have learned has been impacted on in them. They have practical assets. The business officers, true. Most of our problems as newspapers owners in this country is the business management aspect. It is a one-man, one issue. So those are issues I agree that there were trainings need to be set up. That people should look at the media, the business aspect, and train professionals to manage the business aspect. Not to have the publisher carry one hand bag as the advertising agent, as the pay master, and as everything, even the sales agent. I think we need to depart from that. Thank you.
Comments on this wrap up this presentation. So we'll start from the back, and I ask us to please stick to the 30-second. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Medicare shortcase, and I just want to address the issue that Othello Garblah raised, and I'm hoping that we will have the president of the Press Union on. It is unfortunate that we at this day and age will be sitting in this environment and discussing how media or heads of media institutions should bargain with their employees if they don't have funds to pay them. There is no need to open a media institution if you cannot afford to pay your employees. That you will have to bargain with them to let them know that you do not have funds. I think it is about time that the Press Union of Liberia and WAJA try to strategize how we can work around this. What is the role of the Press Union at this time when we see our colleagues not being paid and we see the heads of media institutions building houses and buying the best of all kinds of Bolivia, and they tell you that they don't have funds to pay people. Thank you.
Is this working?
Yes.
Okay. For full disclosure, my name is Sewara Wesley, and I plan on registering a lobbying entity in the United States here to lobby on behalf of entities like this here and other stuff. And I say this to say that, look, you cannot talk about fundraising, like Dr. Korto said, without actually restructuring and continue on. In order to do that, if you need expertise to do that, then call the people coming up to do that. But short of that, you cannot raise some serious funding. Secondly, let's be realistic here. You have to diversify your learning. Oftentimes, the journalists in Liberia, you write on politics, but there are more to politics. I mean, there are more to journalism than politics. You have social issues and whatnot. You have business journalism. You have to diversify in other areas that will allow you to make money. And thirdly, our own work here will align you with talking to professionals in the country here, business leaders, celebrities, and all of that. If you can do some of these things here, at least it will allow you to differentiate your newspaper from other newspapers. And so it's obviously to you here, Korto is right. You cannot tap into public grants unless you are positioned and well restructured to receive those grants. And some of us on this end here can help you do that. Thank you.
All right, I know we all want to say something, but I will beg your indulgence. I've been pushed for time. I've been 15 minutes above my time allotted, and I stand to receive lashes from the president who's presiding over this session. And so I'm going to give the next few minutes to all of our panelists, and I beg not more than 1 minute per second to give their closing comments. Apparently, we'll say ladies first.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the space. I want to end by saying thank you for inviting me. I'm happy that I was able to learn today, about the context of the media and the, problems, the current problems. I believe that we should remove that. There's a cliche that says when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So we need to get out of the box. We need to be innovative. And I know that there are so many people, I respect the work that you're doing, but this is a point where, the rubber meets the road, and we must decide how we want to move forward, both in the media and civil society. The external trend globally is affecting Liberia. Liberia is not, divorced from that. And we must do something about it in restructuring the media and rebuilding our systems and structures. We must also look at the issue of equality, especially for women in the media and the roles that they're playing around decision-making, even on issues like this. So we need to be able to, rejuvenate the system in a way that we can follow non-traditional paths. Maybe the old ways are not working for us. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this important discussion. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say a very big thank you. This is my first time participating in the WAJA program. But let me end with this. Liberia is affected the same way many of the countries are affected by the COVID-19. And the media industry is of no exception. Companies have closed down because they cannot maintain to pay staff. And so the media institution here is only struggling to maintain its presence on the market and ensure that it does its work. And to make it short, it's not that publishers or media owners are deliberately unwilling to pay people, but it is the effect of the COVID-19 on their financial income or revenue generation capacity that has impaired their ability to pay on time. But we hope that these kind of discussions will open the windows of opportunity that the media, the grant that PAC is trying to get from media institutions here, will open more windows that we can source funding, that we can handle some of these things. Again, thank you for having us on your platform.
Thank you, Othello. Ross, Peter. Now, Charles, you can go ahead.
Peter?
So,
okay.
And then we are happy to, again, we always in the United States to grace the occasion. And WAJA has given opportunities to most Liberian journalists to see United States and engage in other meaningful ventures. So as all the speakers said, we strive our meager resources to make sure that we look at the economy of the media. We communicated with the European Union delegation in Liberia. Because of the COVID, we did not conclude to hold a media economic conference and identify those factors that are impediment to the growth of the Liberian media, especially as it relates to the economy. So we'll hold our conference. And then even though some of the entities are not fully paying their reporters, but we can name more than 10 media entities that have gone beyond the benchmark of the PUR collective bargaining. And we're trying to encourage some of them to do that. But the problem is this political ownership of the media is hampering the operation. See, publishers in most cases hold meetings for their members to increase salary of reporters, but it's a difficult situation. So with this collaboration with WAJA, we think all of us will strategize to make sure that the Liberian media continue to be independent, because the lack of resources will create a kind of problem of reporters not being ethical and engaging in acts that are inimical to the journalistic profession. So thank you very much. We always work together. We ourselves are going up and down for the PUR anniversary, which will be held in Lofa County. The preparation is ongoing. I know AJA will be represented here. We'll be having an evangelium, and it will be held on the team enhancing the voices of the citizen and government for sustainable development. We will be looking at the media, the role of the media in sustaining development and other aspects. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Sam. And one of the things that we haven't been able to speak on since we've been here is the issue of attrition. And when you think about attrition and talk about the sustainability of the media in Liberia, can you imagine the number of you sitting over there in America who left different media entities with void left behind? But I mean, we can tie people who want to move on. But what is important is as you move on, it might be very helpful to keep engaged with the institutions that you leave, hopefully, to provide some expertise. The other thing that I'd like to talk about as we wrap up is the question of innovating and specialization. The media is overly concentrated on politics. And to be honest, people who got money to invest, they're not going to waste it in a political landmark. We have to pay attention to specializing. There were times when we had specialized newspapers in Monrovia, but today everybody else is talking politics. Today, if you listen to the radio station, everybody is some talk show host. Everybody is talking politics. Everybody is trying to behave like they are the boss and insulting other people. These are our challenges that we need to address. I mean, nobody wants to work with an entity that is going to be causing other people. I mean, that is a very key issue. We need to change that kind of attitude. Hopefully, the press union can raise some of these issues in this self-regulatory regime because it's getting a little bit messy that people will gang up on radio stations, very angry and sometimes very inciting. And we stay a fragile country. And if we don't pay attention to that, there will be time that we ourselves will not even have the opportunity to function, as journalists. So yes, we have to diversify, but we must pay attention to credibility. We must pay attention to the transparency issue. Of course, the question of payment of journalists must never be, a secondary issue, because if we don't do people development, it is just almost impossible for us to develop the institutions that they work for. So I think first and foremost, the journalists that work for these media institutions must be giving attention. They must be paid what they deserve, whether it's small or not, pay them at the end of the month so that they can take care of their families. You don't expect them to go running. The issue of COVID is not just today. The issue of not paying journalists is not today. COVID just started yesterday. I remember when we ended Ebola, the government was still talking about fighting Ebola. The effect of Ebola stayed with us almost 3-4 years. I'm sure we're going to be talking about COVID long after COVID is gone and trying to use it as a justification for trying not to pay other people. But these are the problems that we must keep talking about. For me, the more we talk about these issues, we begin to trouble some of the people who can make some, decision to change some of the situation. Thank you very much for allowing us this space. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words here. I know that the network has been very challenging today. We wouldn't be able to speak very clearly on some of the points, but it has been very useful and very helpful. And hopefully you, AJA, can intervene a little more in some of the issues that we're talking about back home. Thank you.
Have the final word.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, for clarification sake, I think I made a statement here which came out somehow the wrong way, which was the rhetorical can Fantioma say Mabunirati. Basically, I meant to say, can a market person say Mabunirati? Thank you. I must extend thanks and appreciation to the leadership of WAJA for this opportunity. What I have gathered here so far from the erudite speakers is that the media, there are multiple challenges facing the media. It is said that charity begins at home. We are the watchdog, and we are being told to watch ourselves. That is at the level of training. What you put out there should be able to attract readership. Then at the level of management, if you are a manager or managing editor of a media institution who is critical of the government for being opaque, then you yourself should be open to your employees or to your colleagues. So training comes in the quality of our work, which I alluded to, will set us apart because already there are some sophisticated people on the social media platforms that are challenging us already. So how do we set ourselves apart? Then you are a managing editor, you are writing SUV in Monrovia while your employees, the reporters are not getting paid. How do they say that when you tell them that there's no money, how will they believe you? Then to the government, does the government see or perceive the media as a partner in the consolidation of democracy? If so, then of course, it must be prepared to create an enabling environment. We have at the legislature, we have committees on information. What are they doing? What some colleagues talk about the difficulties of people getting loans from the bank. The government can create the enabling environment. So government should see media institutions or media practitioners as people who are as entities that are a sort of enablement and just treat them that way. No, if you consider media institution to be a fulcrum of democracy, then you should create the environment because it is the government's obligation as Article 7 of our Constitution mandate to manage the economy in a way that it will be equitable for all citizens, for the citizenry, including journalists. So we have these challenges here. I also suggested the establishment of a media endowment fund, and invariably other panelists talk about that. We need to mainstream. We need to at the level, because we are at the level of WAJA, we are a non-governmental organization, so we should be able to prepare ourselves, equip ourselves so that we'll be able to tap into funds that are out there for democratic consolidation. Thank you.
On that note, we want to tell all of our speakers who come from a far field, thank you very much for making this a wonderful period in this convention today. And so I ask the audience to render a round of applause. President of the association, as I turn this floor over.
Yeah. So,
thank you so much, Hassan. Again, thanks to all our panelists. I'm sure everyone in this forum can agree that this was an enlightening discussion. It's something that we at WAJA will begin to see how we can work with the key officers of the building relationship we have and see what we can do from this end to address some of the issues that were raised in the discussion today. But I want to again thank all the panelists for taking the time to be here. I understand the internet issues in Liberia. Some of you had to go above your means to get the scratch pad, so we couldn't be so grateful for your participation again. Thank you all so much. And obviously, this is a continuing dialogue we'll have. We'll continue to engage you, all of you who are on the platform today at some point in the future. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, so the panel discussion is now over. We are about to get into our General Assembly, and I will now hand this session over to the Vice President, who will take it over from this end. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Joe.